Welcome, everybody. This is the Gandhi King course, Soul Force and Social Change. We are now in the Martin Luther King portion of the course. The last 4 weeks of the course, we are beginning. So far, relating to Martin Luther King, we have discussed elements of his early life that contributed to his thinking and his worldview. We have then looked carefully at elements of his basic assumptions, um, including his attitude toward the Bible, where revelation is subject to reason, his views relating to social and political contracts that are related to liberalism in the United States, and his assumptions relating to the rule of law that are, from his point of view, necessary to be able to restrain selfish, competitive individuals uh, and to manifest greater justice in the world. His beliefs, we discovered, were quite different in many ways from Mohandas Gandhi. While Gandhi's trinity of basic beliefs are Sat, Ahimsa, and Tapas, that is, truth, nonviolence, and voluntary suffering, King's basic beliefs are love, power, and justice, where he is heavily influenced by Reinhold Niebuhr, a Christian theologian that he studied when he was in graduate school, where Niebuhr says, love without power is anemic and weak. Power without love is immoral. You need to combine both love and power to have justice. That is fundamental to Martin Luther King's approach and worldview. Um, this is how he describes love as basically uh, God. Love is God, and power is given to human beings by God to give us free will. So love, God, and power, human beings, must act together to bring about justice. This is how he talks about co-working with God. Now, if we are confused about any of that, it's okay, we can move along. But these are related to King's goals. Uh, Today, we will be looking at his goals. And if we have more people join our group, we are close to a threshold where we can have chat rooms with which our miracle worker Harshal in Germany can manage to put us into groups for discussion. Everyone agreed last week that this is a good process where everyone then can participate more easily. We will see, and it is looking like we may have enough people to make that work well. Um, so I will begin discussing King's goals, unless you have a few things you would like to discuss before I begin. Remember, there will be plenty of time to discuss after. I will not take more than 40 minutes or so in my comments so that we have time in our 80-minute class to have discussion. Anyone want to say anything? I'm listening. If Martin Luther King is co-working with God to bring about justice, I am trying to co-work with all of you who are attending this session to bring about better understanding. So silence is golden, and yet participation breeds democratic values. And this is important for King and for me, and I believe for the world. So speak up if you like. Well, then I will not make things more awkward, and let us begin. Uh, Partial can put up. For some reason, can I be heard? Yes. Thank you so much. So, Martin Luther King's goals. The beloved community goal directly relates to the belief he has in love and his assumption that revelation is subject to reason. The beloved community is his philosophical or religious goal. Put very simply, it is massive universal self-actualization. Where Gandhi talks about self-realization, moksha, King is more secular in his way of looking at things, and he basically looks to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and he wants people worldwide, not just in the United States, to move from having their basic physiological needs taken care of. That's the bottom of Maslow, yes. To proceed up to having security needs taken care of, then social needs, then self-respect needs, to eventually people become more self-actualized. And the law for King is intended to protect this entire process so that everyone can be all that they can be. It's the fulfillment of every person's potential. For King, that means personality. You must be able to have the support system necessary to become a great artist or a great musician or a great athlete or a great physicist. Whatever you have as a potential, society needs to support. That is part of the beloved community. He wants us to be liberated from all the barriers or walls that still separate us. For King, segregation, racial segregation, is a barrier or a wall that divides human beings from one another. It scars and harms the personality, and we must be liberated from these barriers and walls. And I suppose in religious terms, the beloved community is the biblical fulfillment of, and the lion and the lamb shall lie down together, and they shall make war no more. People will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks and make no more war. For a king, the beloved community, again, is an ideal that, like Ram Rajya for Gandhi, may not be able to be fully achieved, but it needs to be striven for. It needs to be a goal that we seek to achieve as much as possible. One of the quotes that comes from one of King's last sermons before he was killed was, our allegiance must become ecumenical rather than sectional. We must develop an overriding loyalty to mankind as a whole. That is directly from Martin Luther King's speech called Why I'm Against the War in Vietnam, delivered at Riverside Church in New York City. in April of 1967, almost exactly 1 year before he was killed. I hope to access elements of that speech. So in a later session, you will be able to hear Martin Luther King himself deliver portions of the speech that I think was perhaps his best ever. The economic goals of King, number 2, is to make democracy real. That is a political and economic goal. But if we look at that category, you can see that making democracy real involves protecting and expanding civil liberties and civil rights. He sees this as foundational to democracy. Civil liberties are basically um, foundational rights like freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, the right to protest. Civil liberties in court in the United States include your right to an attorney, a lawyer, your right to be protected against self-incrimination, your right against cruel and unusual punishments, all of the Bill of Rights of the U.S. Constitution are mostly civil liberties. The first, fourth, fifth, sixth, and 10th Amendments are civil liberties in the United States. Civil rights involve rights given to you as a matter of law, and these include voting. For King, the great power of the vote is foundational to democracy, and the more people who have the right to vote, that's civil liberty, the more people will be able to make democracy real. But if you don't have freedom of speech, for example, how can you gain the right to vote? So basic civil liberties are for King foundational to in democracy anywhere. He has, in making democracy real, the desire to develop what he would describe as welfare state capitalism and democratic socialism. I will take a tangent with that in a few minutes because I think these concepts are oftentimes not well understood. The basic idea, of course, is you vote, you get elected officials, you pass and enforce legislation to give greater justice, to give to each their due. And certainly for King, making democracy real is not just in the United States, it is an international value. We need to strengthen and enforce international law and organizations. King himself was, when he says we need to be ecumenical and not sectional, he means not just transcend barriers of race and religion and culture. He believes we need to strengthen organizations like the United Nations, the International Criminal Court of Justice, and we need to enforce international law, human rights law, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and other agreements that have been made among a great many nations. Now, this is getting a little boring. I want to come back to the revolution of values in a moment. But if Harshal, you could, for hopefully no more than 10 minutes, go to economic systems and types of capitalism. I think this will help us understand where King is coming from and maybe help us discuss more clearly what we're talking about. I find among my students over the years, there's a lot of confusion about what is capitalism, what is socialism. And while we could get into great depth, a fundamental definition may be helpful. You can see that here I say communism, and you can take a screenshot of this if you like and possibly blow it up on your computer. I'm not saying explode it or make your computer blow up, but just make the print a little larger so that you can read it. Communism is an economic system in which the means of production, distribution, and communications are communally owned or controlled. Communism can be Marxist, it can be religious. I would probably describe Gandhi as primarily a religious communist. King Gandhi does not believe in that you even own your own body. Everything that you possess is for the common good, for Gandhi. He is not a Marxist, but he does believe in communal ownership and control. That is, everyone needs to practice trusteeship and share whatever is in their possession for the common good. Socialism is an economic system, similarly, in which means of production, distribution, communications are socially owned or controlled. Under socialism, you have a state, you have a government, but it can be state ownership or it can be state control through using of tax systems and other regulations. Socialism does not have to be centralized. There are very decentralized forms of socialism, such as in the United States, farmers putting their resources together in a cooperative, where perhaps they store their grain together in one large building, which they have purchased together and socially own together. So, without being too confusing, socialism is social ownership or control. Communism is communal ownership or control. Fascism is corporate ownership or control by corporations. It is some confusion, there is overlap, but we do have a clear understanding that corporations are the center of fascism. Hitler, Mussolini, and others wanted to organize the state like a corporation with one leader, one chairman of the board, and a cabinet or others who are directly receiving orders from the chairman of the board and report to the chairman. So under Mussolini, for example, who created the word fascism, corporate control was that there would be no independent unions. There may be a state union for teachers, for example, and his Secretary of Education, if you want to call it that, for Mussolini, would take direct orders from El Duce, the leader, and would enforce those orders among all the teachers under the Department of Education. It was a highly centralized power structure. In many ways, like a military power structure, but it is a state organized like a corporation. Now, capitalism is private ownership or control. Almost all liberals are capitalists. Not all capitalists are liberals. But Martin Luther King was influenced by liberalism in the United States, and he was, for most of his life, a type of capitalist, believing in private ownership and control, and that the state should protect private property. you will notice that I have at least 4 types of capitalism. And this is set out visually so that you can see what kind of capitalist Martin Luther King was. And by looking at this graph, this categorization of types, you can also see where King is going to disagree with, say, someone like Donald Trump. You can see that free enterprise capitalism responds to 6 different questions with no, 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 no. In other words, a free enterprise capitalist like Adam Smith, classically, uh, or someone like Rand Paul in the United States today, says government should not protect business, government should not stop monopolies, government should not regulate business, should not have any social programs, and certainly should not protect basic needs. No, 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 no. A free enterprise capitalist believes the government is best, that governs very, very little, and they see no need for really government programs except for a small military to protect you from external invasion and a court system that will allow you to work out your disagreements when you have conflicts. They see no need for national health care, no need for things like food stamps or supplemental assistance for hunger. They see no need, even for public education. All education should be private. That's a very old style of capitalism. There are those in the world who believe in it, would appear to include the current president of Argentina, who is another subject we can discuss. Mercantilism is the next type of capitalism, and you see it says yes, then no, 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 no. But mercantilists like Donald Trump see is that government should protect business from unfair foreign competition, for example. That is why Mr. Trump believes in taxing imports to protect businesses in the United States. That is why the United States is currently engaged in a lot of trade wars with Canada, Mexico, and probably the European Union, China. The United States is economically at war with most of the world today because Trump is trying to make America great again, meaning for him, we need to protect U.S. corporations, protect U.S. businesses, but he does not see much role for the U.S. government in any other area. So he is working towards getting rid of the Department of Education, getting rid of environmental regulations, getting rid of, you see what I'm saying? He's not a crazy man, Donald Trump. He is a type of capitalist that can be described as mercantilist. Regulatory capitalists, you see, give 2 yeses: yes to protecting business and yes to stopping monopolies. Regulatory capitalists believe that if you don't stop businesses from getting too big, the big fish will eat up all the little fish. Walmart and Amazon will take over all of the smaller businesses, and you will have monopolies that will not give you the best price because there is no competition. And so regulatory capitalists like Teddy Roosevelt, President of the United States 100 years ago, 110 years ago, he believed in regulating businesses. Now, welfare state capitalists are more like Martin Luther King. They come into the US idea system under Franklin Roosevelt, the Democrat, in the 1930s. When the United States was in a desperate, deep depression, economic depression, Franklin Roosevelt creates Social Security. He legalizes labor unions. He increases regulations on business, and he provides, eventually, through Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s, some kind of healthcare systems, Medicare and Medicaid. He expands Social Security. He creates public housing. All of these things, from Franklin Roosevelt's point of view, are protecting the life of people in the United States. And your life, according to John Locke, is your first property. You own yourself. So people like Martin Luther King Jr. Believe in a very strong role for the government to not just protect businesses, stop monopolies, regulate business, but also to provide social programs and a great many social programs. But most welfare state capitalists, like Franklin Roosevelt, like Lyndon Johnson, do not want socialism. They don't want all basic needs to be provided or assured. This is where King is different. As we will see in future sessions, King, toward the end of his life, to try to self-actualize more people and to dramatically give greater justice to more people, would call himself a socialist. This is not normally understood, because King would tell this to his friends, to his private associates, many of whom I interviewed. And King would describe himself personally as a socialist. He would never, that I have seen, say that publicly. Because to call yourself a socialist in the United States confuses most Americans, and they have a hard time understanding the difference between socialism and communism. And basically, to call yourself a socialist in the United States is almost political death, because people who are liberals will not want to listen to you anymore. So while King, in fact, became from welfare state capitalist to socialist, he did not publicly describe that in those kinds of words, because to do so would have reduced his influence in the United States. Are there questions about this? How Martin Luther King was a certain kind of capitalist who became more socialist in the last 2 years of his life. I think you can see how very much disagreement he would have with Donald Trump. You can see the difference between a mercantilist and a welfare state capitalist. They are very, very different. And this is one of the reasons why Republicans in the United States and many Democrats today in the United States are in such great disagreement. Mr. Trump is trying to make America great again, taking it back to an idealized past, almost into the 1890s, where mercantilism was the primary form of capitalism in the United States. Martin Luther King wanted to move the United States towards greater human rights and justice, which for him was more socialist. Now I'm looking at the time, trying to see the time. And if we can go back to the original slide, very good. Harshal is beginning to read my mind. That's scary. Maybe he should be teaching this course. Harshal, do you want to teach the course?
Yeah, next time.
Good. Maybe next year I will be dead. Well, these things happen. This life has its limits. And Harshal will teach the course, but he can still make use of these taped sessions if he wants to.
Definitely.
Um, for King, the political goal is not just to make democracy real, but it is a revolution of values. King, toward the end of his life, as we will see, called for a revolution of values. He was critical of the triple evils of racism, militarism, and economic exploitation. That's a direct quote. And again, that comes from his speech at Riverside Church, Why I'm Against the War in Vietnam. And notice that these are related for King. Racism, militarism, and economic exploitation are a package deal. You cannot fight one without fighting all three. They are interrelated, they are interwoven. This is King's point of view. He came out against the war in Vietnam and was criticized by many civil rights leaders for doing that, because when you are criticizing militarism, Dr. King, you're distracting us from our focus on racism. And from King's point of view, the goal has to be to abolish all three, because to fight racism in the United States, we also have to fight racism as the United States is making war on Vietnam and killing over 2 million people of color. That is racism too. You cannot be racist abroad in your military policies and economic exploitative abroad in trying to exploit cheap labor in other countries and people of color in other countries. You have to fight that if you're going to fight racism at home. Clearly, a revolution of values for King also means in the United States and elsewhere, we need to desegregate. We need to break down the barriers, the walls that separate us. Sometimes these are legal laws and walls, like a white's only entrance to a grocery store, a black only entrance to a grocery store. This is what legal segregation brought in many states of the United States. For King, this, of course, was evil. But it's not just the laws that need to be changed. When the laws are abolished that separate us, that's good for King. But then we need to integrate. After the walls come down, then the neighbors who were previously separated by these walls can speak more clearly. They can visit each other's homes. They can get to know one another. And that is how integration is more likely to happen after the walls have been brought down. This is from Martin Luther King's point of view. And again, this was his personal experience, going back to his childhood. Segregation was present when he could not visit with his best friend in childhood at age 12, when his white parents of that white child would no longer allow their child to play with Martin Luther King. That barrier brought hate into King's heart. Remember that discussion? In King's experience, that hate can only be brought down after the barrier is brought down. And when King was active in the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, when he was at Morehouse College in Atlanta, he was then together in the room with white people, black people, all together. The barrier had been brought down, and so King was able to overcome the hate that he held for white people for 5 years, from age 12 to age 17. We need to confront and transform old structural barriers and idea systems. This is a goal. This is part of the revolution of values. Here is where King and Gandhi are significantly different, though they overlap. Gandhi believes in personal transformation, of a revolution of values where we convert the opponent, and the more individuals who become our brothers and sisters, the greater the family of humankind is able to flourish. Gandhi is more on an individual level. His strategy is largely gauged to change the heart of individuals, one by one by one by one. King is happy to have individuals change their lives, but he is primarily concerned about structures, structural violence, structural racism, systems of discrimination. He is looking more on the macro level, and King wants to change laws, change cultural values on a mass level, which he believes will make it easier for individuals to have a change of heart. So for King, the focus is not so much on individual change, it's on massive structural change. And that is a significant difference. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but it's a significant difference from Mohandas Gandhi. And of course, for King, we need to cultivate and practice nonviolence as a strategy and lifestyle. Though Gandhi focuses more on the lifestyle and King focuses more on the strategy. We need to join power and love to bring about greater justice for King. It's a strategic sort of power brought to use against structures and systems of exploitation and racism. It's a very important strategy. And here I'm leaving with a last quote so that we can begin to have small groups pretty soon. For King, the whole quote is actually where he says, while there may have been a time when war is justified, King actually says this, there may have been a time when war was justified, as against Hitler, for example, during World War II. There may have been a just war. For King, the bringing of the atomic bomb in 1945 changed everything. And quote, the choice is no longer between nonviolence and violence. It is either nonviolence or non-existence. Let's repeat that. King is more of a nuclear pacifist. His commitment to nonviolence is a matter of principle now, after 1945. because King believes we can now destroy the world as we know it with the weapons that we have created. Quote, the choice is no longer between nonviolence and violence. It is either nonviolence or non-existence. This is different from Gandhi. Gandhi's commitment to principled nonviolence goes long before the creation of nuclear weapons. King's principled commitment to nonviolence comes only after the 1945 mushroom cloud that came into the world. Before we have breakout rooms, I'm looking to see, yes, we have a good number of people with us today. There are 16 of us. I am pleased. Not everyone has technological difficulties. Is there anything that someone would like to say now before I give a couple of questions that I will ask you to discuss in your breakout sessions? What do you think of King's goal?
Michael, can I ask you something?
Yes, Shushil, I know that voice.
Right. Michael, what you said that capitalism and socialism, where the development lies, is it in capitalism or in socialism?
Development is everywhere. Oftentimes, though, in a globalized world, which has glorified free trade and the free flow of goods and services across national boundaries, which glorifies private property, they say, free trade capitalists say, that is development. Clearly, Gandhi disagrees, as we discussed in our first month together, where he believes it's more important to have self-reliance, swadeshi, decentralized control over the means of production in the villages. And Gandhi is not much of an advocate of free trade. Capitalists, of course, believe their form of development is the only way. And total free trade advocates are really free enterprise people in the handout that I provided. Mercantilists believe in trade also, but it's very controlled. It's America first, or it's Britain first. The British Empire in India was brought through mercantilism, with the British protecting the British East India Company, yes, at all costs. Even the cost of independence for the people of India. They wanted to control the territory to make profit. Regulatory capitalists and welfare state capitalists oftentimes also promote freedom of trade. Martin Luther King would say, Shushil, development ultimately comes from a common support from your community. In other words, socialism, where the society as a whole provides the basic needs of life so that, let's say, a brilliant composer like Mozart can continue to make music and not have to beg for money and die at an early age because he became sick because of his economic instability. Musical development was increased by Mozart Artistic development was certainly increased by Leonardo da Vinci and others, yes. But it comes, according to King, more from a society where every person is part of a village, is part of a group that supports them. And they can become all that they can be. They can develop their full potentials as a sculptor or a painter because they have the support of society. Think about it, Shushil. What is true development? Wealth? Does wealth really in itself make you better? King would say a society where you have health care, education paid for through college, where you have housing. If you're poor, you still have housing, where hunger has been abolished. This is a society where every artist, every person who has special skills will be able to develop those skills. That is the beloved community. It's not in the
But
most wealthy society, it is in the one that provides everyone to develop their potentials.
but art need patronage, otherwise it won't survive
Why?
in the
Why?
in
If
the
you're
society.
patronage, what if you don't need patronage? Think about that. Mozart needed patrons. He needed wealthy people to support him. What if the society was such that Mozart, his patrons, would be his community? A community where there is a guaranteed annual income. No one is poor. A community where everyone is able to take art education in school for free. A community where if you're sick, you have health care provided for free. What if your patron is the entire society? You may have more Mozarts, yes? That is what King is talking about. And this revolution of values he's talking about is a revolution of our thinking. And that is hard, isn't it? Now, it is time to have small groups if we're going to have breakout sessions at all. And in those sessions, feel free to discuss what you want. But I would especially appreciate if you spent time seeing the relationship between a beloved community, making democracy real, and a revolution of values. And if that is too broad, then think about the basic assertion that King would say that we need to move towards socialism, not dictatorship, but socialism that respects freedom of speech, press, assembly, basic rights, and voting. We need to move towards socialism so that everyone will have the patronage necessary to develop fully all of the skills that they may be able to develop. Is King right? Should we move towards democratic socialism? That is the goal issue that might be a good focus for discussion. Thank you, Abdullah, for your comments in our breakout group. Time ran short. In our group, about half of the people were able to speak. I'm hoping the other group also had at least half of you speaking.
We were wishing that kings kings could live more to give us more depth of life and everything. He was a very short span of life, so we were very sorry about that.
Well, 39 years. Again,
Yes.
Gandhi was he was almost killed for good when he was 38. And
Yes.
so when you have the blessing of more years, you have the possibility of more evolution.
Yes.
Um, Personally, I believe that had King lived longer, he would have become an environmentalist.
It could
If
be many things.
the logic is very clear. If he had lived longer, he would have been an advocate for LGBTQ uh, gay rights. Um, if he had lived longer, he would have been far more strong as an advocate of women's rights. On the other hand, we have the time that we are given in this world, and we do. So tell me, uh, what benefits did you have from the small group today? How many people spoke, and how did you feel about the breakout session?
Akshay, she was talking, and half of her talking we have shifted. Let her speak because she wanted to say something. She was on.
Yeah, I came to know that tomorrow is a holy, so that I won't venture out tomorrow till afternoon.
Yes, we were talking about holy. Yes. Well, why not? You can always wash off the paint, Shushio.
There is a water scarcity in Hyderabad.
Okay.
Okay.
I may have to go to ashram. There are some programs going on, and they have requested my help. I may, even though it is a holiday, I may go to ashram.
Aha. And so we may see you with pretty colors in your face.
I don't know what is told for me.
Sibi, I didn't know you were with us today. I am happy to hear you.
See how I can miss your words of wisdom.
Well, I'm hoping that some of what we share about Martin Luther King helps you all understand a little more, and then, of course, encourages you to study more in the future.
True.
I want to especially thank Shushil for his comments today, which provoked good discussion.
One more good news, Professor Michael. I done with Acharya Vinoba Bhave's painting, and it has been approved by Chandan Sen Gupta sir, and it takes 1 month for to release his book on behalf of Pavnar Ashram.
That is good news. Congratulations, Shushil.
Yeah, thanks to CB sir also.
I want to thank Reza also for posting in our WhatsApp group uh, the news relating to the young man who was arrested in the United States because of his political views. The Muslim man who had permanent resident status and the right to work here has been arrested because a year ago he was leading protests against the military actions in Gaza. Thank you, Reza, for sharing that with us in the WhatsApp group. Are there others who would like to uh, have a few comments about today?
Thank you very
Yes,
much, Professor
just
Michael.
okay.
We had very wonderful session today. And one sister was there, Akshaya. She was speaking in our group. She was in the second group. She was speaking, but on the time of her speaking, we lost the connection in second group. Akshaya is here. She was starting with something regarding psychology. Very good topic.
Akshaya has much expertise that is worthy to be shared.
Yeah.
All of us have our experiences and our skills that we can share. That is why a group learning process is better than just listening to one old man like me. It is important to all of us to contribute.
Yes, Professor. Once again, I just want to thank you for giving a very detailed lecture. The old man is not boring.
Well, boring is bad. Boring is no good.
No, you are fascinating. I really enjoy your lectures, though.
But Abdulli, remember that while we speak of the differences between Gandhi and King, there are similarities. Gandhi in South Africa was fighting structures of racism. Gandhi in India was not just fighting against British colonialism, he was also fighting against structures of untouchability and caste. And so I think as we are evolving in our understanding of Gandhi and King, it may be largely a difference of emphasis. It's not either or, either the individual or the structure. It's that Gandhi focuses more on the individual, King focuses more on the structure. Yes? But it's not that they are opposite. It is a difference of
Y-
yes?
Yes, you are right. But the thing is, Gandhi believed by enlightening the individuals, like the things that he is fighting, will cease to happen, But for Martin Luther King, he believed that, enlightening the individuals alone cannot solve the issue without dealing with the structures. So that is why Martin Luther King was primarily focusing on the structures. Yeah, because for him, enlightening the individuals alone, will not give you a headway. You can only have a headway when you deal with the structures. Because when you dismantle the structures, you're going to have laws, the laws in place, and the laws regulate society. That is why you have the Ten Commandments, in American constitutions and so forth, the Civil Liberty Act, for example. Yeah, so basically they are all freedom fighters in their own rights, they all stood for humanity. And, we need to acknowledge that, they have done tremendously well in their own rights. Though they have some differences, but the differences are similar, and I believe that is due to you know, their various backgrounds and also, their approaches in dealing with the issues that they are confronted with.
And it is not just a matter of history or country, it is also religion. Where Gandhi is looking at
So,
things from a Hindu perspective, King is looking at things much more from a liberal Christian perspective. And Gandhi is much more non binary, uh, not so dualistic, while King is much more binary and dualistic. And these are factors that do, as we will see in the next 2 days, significantly influence the dynamic of their strategies.
yeah, so and also like yesterday I was also watching the video clip of your lecture 6, where you talked about Gandhi's approach to religion, because you said like, Gandhi see himself as a Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, because he see religion as a vehicle, to climb at the top of the mountain. It doesn't matter which religions one believe in. The goal is, they all aim for one goal, that is to reach at the top of the mountain. Yeah, so basically religion is just like a vehicle, you know, one used to get into his or her destination. Yeah, but if you look at some of these freedom fighters, their religious belief also plays a significant role in their, ideologies and also their approach, in dealing or in facing the powers that they are, standing up against.
Thank you.
May I make a comment?
Of course.
What I see that
Yeah.
both of them are very devoted to a religion, to their religion, but their first priority to the development of the people of the country. The people and the country is the most priority of both of them. This is the one common thing I think. Those days the situation and the circumstance was such that white and Negroes was so much indifference. They don't allow them to sit even beside them and all this. So the situation was like that. But at the end of the day, if you conclude in this way that they love the people of the country and they want to contribute for the development of the people of their country, that's what I understood.
Yes, you are right. And just to buttress on that, all of them have people at the center of their, advocacy. They all advocate for the rights of the people. That is the downtrodden or the less privileged people in the society. We need to put emphasis on that. They are not standing up for the wealthiest people or the powerful people in the society. They stood for the people without voice, people without any influence in the society in which they are in. So you are right. Look now, when you said, they all stood for people and country. I will say people first, then country second.
Yes, that's what I want to
Yeah.
mention.
Yeah, let me
We,
also make my thought
and
on that.
we're going to soon need to stop the recording, but someone was just now trying to speak. I think it was
Yeah, first of all,
Mamadou,
Muhammad.
and then has his hand raised. So let us hear from Mamadou and from Ali.
Yeah, that is true. Like what the other people are trying to say between them. For me, they are all freedom fighters from my own view of points. Because by looking at their way of structure, they use different way, but they all meet at the same point. Because what they are all fighting for is to see human beings are all treated well, equality, wherever you are, no matter the religious, the color, human beings, they see human beings as one. There's no differences. There's a color difference, but everybody should be treated equally. So all of them, they stood for the independence and the freedom of human beings when you look at their struggle along the line. And at the same time, what they went through, they don't want other people also who don't have the power to fight for it. So they take it upon themselves to fight for others behind them to enjoy the same privilege. They don't want them to see them in difficulty for them what they passed through, like the life of Martin Luther King. He was facing racism, during his childhood time. Up to the stage he grew up. So if you look at others around, they are powerless to do the same. So they all have the same view of points, the freedom of human being in the world, not only in their country, because today around the world, when you look at the world today, we are all having the belief and the thought of Gandhi and King, freedom to each and everybody. That's why Gaza people are fighting. They are claiming for their freedom. When you go to Ukraine and other parts of the world. So I think their thought is very important. And when we utilize it in today's generation,
Please come
I
in.
think peace will be there every day.
Very good. Ali, if you would like to speak, that is good. And then I will be having to leave the session because we have a visitor at my home.
Oh,
Ali,
okay. Okay. I would like to contribute something about structures.
please.
And I want to say that there are three types of structural changes. And in those three types of structural changes, I think Kingi did two, and Gandhi had one extra type of a structural change where he brought in new structures. For example, the decentralization as a structure, he brought in as a new structure, where Kingi didn't bring in any new structure in place. And then Gandhi also wanted to remove the colonial structure in total, so that they can India can have a new structure of independence India, which Kingi didn't do something like that. So I think that is the main difference between Gandhi and King in terms of structural changes. But the other two types of changes in structures, I think both of them they did. We have a change where one of it is a cumulative kind of change, where you have a structure, but you think the structure is not being implemented the way it's supposed to be implemented. So you advocate for the structure to be implemented. So the structure is there, you just want it to be implemented. And then we have a situation where you have a structure, but you feel this structure is not working the way it's supposed to work. So you want to have an alternative kind of change in the structure, where you bring in new laws, or you change the law and bringing another law. So those two types of structural changes, I think both Gandhi and Kingi did them. But again, for Gandhi, did something else. He wanted to remove colonialism in total, as the colonial structure in total, and bring in another Swaraj for independence in India. And also he brought in other structures like decentralization structures, which were there. That's it. Thank you.
We have very, very bright people in this group. And I can see you have much to share, and I thank you for sharing today. Tomorrow, we will focus more on strategy, and on Saturday, more on guidelines for strategy, actual tactics. And we will compare Gandhi and King, and I am looking forward to your insights